more. Is there perhaps amidst all this narrative building, is this deliberate to try and tell us that we are weak, we need to be ruled, we need to be governed, and we are inferior?
Very true.
Is this a deliberate conditioning which we need to break out of?
Yes, and that's a colonial hand down, Anand, which I think the British started. Of course, the Persian chroniclers and others kept deriding us, saying the Hindus don't even have a sense of history writing, as Al-Biruni and others wrote. And once it came down to Macaulay and all the others, it was that there's no knowledge in India, there's nothing that they have of their own. And this was dinned into our heads that right from that myth of the Aryan invasion that was created, our earliest people have all come from outside. The destiny of you and your land is to be ruled by people from outside, thereby justifying their rule over us. We give this land civilization, education, culture, otherwise you were a set of barbarians. And so thereby justifying that foreign rule, which is what the British did, saying this is just one episode in the pattern of your long historical existence. And that we very subconsciously, I think, imbibed even after independence, when ideally after independence there should have been the revival that we are seeing today. But unfortunately, I think in the decades after freedom, our historiography has been so caught up in the stranglehold of ideology, the Marxist ideology of how we look at history, which further complicated this handover. They were very loyal, takedowns or inheritors of this legacy, and they perfected it further by inducing more sense of apologia, about guilt, self-loathing, lack of self-worth. All the time you are only harping on the negatives. Every society has positives and negatives. And I must emphasize here that it's this book or my work, it's not to stir up a sense of jingoism and pride of, Mera Bharat Mahan.
You've tried to steer clear of that.
Correct. Because there's a very thin line. When you talk of this revisionism and so on, there is a slippery slope of falling down jingoism. But I think feeling a sense of genuine pride and genuine worth about yourself, your ancestors and their achievements and where you have come down, I think this is a right of every citizen of every nation in the world. Only India and Indians are denied this, and when we do this, we are called Hindu nationalism and supremacy, saffronization and all of this, which is very, very unfortunate.
Yeah, because I see the effort to try and pull us as a nation, as a civilization, as an entity out of our inferiority complex and that mindset, to try and give us a sense of belief, is being misconstrued as muscle flexing and a superiority complex being imbued. And that's why even Prime Minister Narendra Modi is being dubbed by this academia as a Hindu nationalist PM. Now, do you believe this is also deliberate? How do you counter a narrative like that? When you know the intent is to instill belief, how do you counter this?
I think the best way to counter is to continue your work. So I have been at the forefront of so many attacks, as you know, from people from all over the world. But
some even saying, how can you call him a historian? He's a fake, etc.
I may be recognized by the Royal Historical Society of UK, but then that's not enough. And I have a PhD, that's not enough. So anyway, be that as it may. But I think the best way to counter, if you really have to, there's no point answering anybody. You have to continue with your work, and as individuals, as groups, as a nation. And I think that's what Mr. Modi does. He doesn't stand by to answer anybody. He's on his mission, which he goes on and on about. Barking dogs on the way may bark. So I think that's the only way to deal with it. And I think once India's emergence and resurgence is inevitable now. Whether
Good evening, welcome to Brass Tacks. I'm Zakir Jacob. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar was in Moscow today, where in a joint press conference with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov, the External Affairs Minister extolled Russia as a time-tested partner. India so far in this war, which is well into its 9th month now, has so far walked a fine balance, not alienating either Russia or the West since this war began. Yes, it has not voted against Russia at the UN Security Council or the UNGA. It has also amped up oil purchases from Russia since this war began. Both of those things have not gone down well with the West. But countries in the West do understand that India, just like every other country on the planet, will look out for its own interests and for its own people. So now the question that's being asked in Western circles, something that was not anticipated, something that was perhaps even unthinkable 8 months ago when this war began, is can India play a mediator between Russia and Ukraine? Can we finally see some form of conclusion to this war? And can India show its ability and its heft with both East and West to bring these two warring parties to the dialogue table? But first, the story so far.
As Prime Minister Modi conveyed to President Putin in Samarkand in September, this is not an era of war.
In his first visit to Moscow since Russia invaded Ukraine 9 months ago, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar set the tone of the talks. Amid increasing hostilities between Moscow and Kiev, Jaishankar met his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, and advised a return to dialogue.
The global economy is simply too interdependent for a significant conflict anywhere not to have major consequences elsewhere.
At the moment, Russia and Ukraine are far from negotiations. Ukraine is gaining momentum on the battleground, while Russia is doubling down. A growing energy crisis from this stalemate could spell a miserable winter for Ukraine and other parts of Europe. In such trying times, could India play mediator? After all, Prime Minister Modi shares a good rapport with Russian President Vladimir Putin, who has in turn been all praises. When the two leaders met in Samarkand in September, Prime Minister Modi told him that war is not the answer. But the West has been consistently pressurizing New Delhi to isolate Moscow and targeting our energy purchases from Russia. But Jaishankar once again made it clear that buying Russian oil is to India's advantage, and so we'll continue to do it.
As today the world's third largest consumer of oil and gas, it is our fundamental obligation to ensure that the Indian consumer has the best possible access on the most advantageous terms to international markets.
It's a tightrope walk for India because of the growing threat from China. It can't afford to antagonize either Russia or the West. So can India broker peace between Russia and Ukraine?
All right, let me now bring in our full panel who's joining us for this debate. It's a very simple question that we're putting forth, and you can go to our YouTube pages, our Twitter handles as well. Can India play mediator between Russia and Ukraine? Joining us, Ambassador Anil Triguniat, former diplomat. Dr. Tara Karta is former director with the National Security Council Secretariat. Dr. Sergei Dvorinov is president of IDC Russia. Vlad Sidrenko is a journalist, and Raymond Vickery is senior associate at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Let me start with you, Ambassador Triguniat. 8 months ago, when this war began, no one would have dared ask this question. But today, this question is being asked in open circles in the West as well as in the East. Can India play mediator? The question is, does India have the goodwill, the heft, and the diplomatic negotiation room to try and bring these two warring parties to the dialogue table?
Thank you, Zaka. If you remember that in the very beginning of this war, Prime Minister Modi had spoken to President Putin and President Zelensky. Of course, it was also in the context of evacuating Indians from there. But at the same time, India has always been, and consistently, whenever we have voted, we have talked about peace, dialogue, diplomacy, UN Charter, territorial integrity and sovereignty. And this has been a consistent stand of India. It is a principled stand of India.
Am I loud and clear?
Yeah, go on, Mr. Triguniat. I can hear you, yeah.
Yeah. But at the same time, India does have that heft because Russia is a trusted and time-tested partner. President Putin has a relationship with Prime Minister Modi. He listens to Prime Minister Modi. When he said era of war is over, President Putin said he's ready to talk. But at the same time, we know that the Western countries have been involved in full force in Ukraine and have been trying to egg him on. And today, Zelensky, only yesterday, as you know, NSA, the American NSA spoke to the Russians and were talked about this war so that it does not escalate further. So they are pressurizing Zelensky also to come to the table or at least talk about the dialogue. And that's where the role of India comes into the picture, because throughout the war we have helped Ukraine through humanitarian assistance. So there is a goodwill on both sides. And if the two sides agreeable to some kind of a thing, so whether it is through shuttle diplomacy, whether being a conduit or try to create some kind of a ceasefire or rapprochement, India is ready to contribute. Prime Minister Modi said it.
Okay.
And it's going to deliver on it if at all both sides are ready to.
Let me ask Dr. Tarakarta what Ambassador Trigunit referred to when Prime Minister met with Vladimir Putin in Samarkand at the sidelines of the SCO summit back in September. Dr. Karta, he said, "Ye yudh ka yug nahi hai. This is not the era of war, this is the era of peace." But subsequent to that, over the last 2 months, what we have seen is a doubling down by Russia. It is attacking civilian infrastructure in Ukraine. It has really gone after the energy infrastructure of Ukraine. And on the other side, Ukraine has also made some territorial gains on the battlefield. If anything, since Samarkand, things have only gotten far more entrenched between these two sides. So what then is the hope that both of them will come to the negotiating table, or that neutral countries like India may be able to influence them to come to the negotiating table?
Zaka, first and foremost, anybody can only mediate if both sides want it.
Correct.
Right? If they don't, there's nothing you can do. Number two is, when you will find that just before a mediation is about to begin, both sides will do their utmost to get as much territory as possible. They will throw everything but the garden sink into the fight, so that they are negotiating from a position of strength. I think that is what is happening now. I think both sides, for the first time, Zelensky has said that he's open to negotiations, of course, with all the conditions which you can expect. I mean, those will be conditions that not an inch of territory and all the rest of it. But these are all positioning. This is all the actual rise in fighting, as well as these statements, is a positioning before negotiations begin. And as far as India's role is concerned, I think we already did a little bit of quiet negotiation earlier. Where the grain shipments. I think so. I mean, that's what I think. So we can advise Russia on being known as a solid friend. You saw the social media hashtag Druzhba Dosti. So there is a sense that India is solidly, also not entirely on Russia's side, but at least that we are a well-wisher. So I think we have a role, and the role is, I'll tell you, I think what we should do is, and the international community, is that those areas which Russia has annexed and said that, we're going to hold a referendum, why not push for a genuine referendum in those places? If they really want to join, let them join, but it should be a transparent negotiation. It will take a long time. But that, I think, is where you can begin to talk.
Vlad Sidorenko is a journalist who's joining us from Kiev. I think one of the things that's coming through clearly is that Zelensky has taken a very, for want of a better phrase, a very maximalist position, that there's no question of giving up even an inch of territory. How does one contemplate some kind of a negotiated settlement when parts of Donetsk, Luhansk, even Zaporizhia and Kherson, of course, there's a lot of fighting that's been going on over the last few weeks. But these are areas where largely Russia, you can debate for a long time about the nature of those referenda, but those referenda got carried out and Russia annexed those areas. So how does one square off this position that we're not going to give up an inch of territory? In fact, Zelensky is saying that even Crimea is on the table. Surely you don't expect the Russian side to come to the negotiating table if this is the position taken by the Ukrainian president?
It's a very interesting question, but I should say that there is no complex analytics or political science here in this question, I believe. And that's why everyone needs to be honest with themselves, I think. Politicians around the world must be honest with their peoples. And there are 2 points that need to be told truthfully to call a spade, First one. The new Hitler, I mean President Putin, unleashed the biggest war on the European continent since 1945. The world was silent when this new Hitler did it in Chechnya, when he did it in Georgia in 2008, in Crimea and Donbass in 2014. World silence on the arrogant and absolutely cynical violation of international law gave rise to confidence in totally impunity. We know all this well from the history of 1938, when the world bashfully sold Czechoslovakia to Hitler. Then war crime in Poland in 1939 plunging the world into chaos. Look, the world is doing the same thing right now. And the second thing, the world's leading countries and their politicians must be honest that Ukraine, which possessed the third world largest nuclear weapons arsenal under the guarantee of world superpowers, having supported international law, got rid of these weapons. The whole planet is now looking at a situation where instead of guaranteed security, we got betrayal. We got the biggest war since 1945. All the countries of the planet Earth look at the fact that nuclear weapons are the only guarantee of security, and no international treaties are more reliable than the atomic bomb in service with the army. Answer honestly to yourselves what the world will do by looking at the largest country in Europe, Ukraine, when 50 or 60 countries receive atomic weapons. When will they also realize that the world order no longer exists?
Okay, let me now go on to, with your permission, let me go on to Dr. Raymond Vickery. One of the things that's being said is the reason why Ukraine has been fighting for so long and so gutsily. Of course, this is an existential threat for the Ukrainians, but it's also because of this almost endless tap of weapons that's coming from the West, particularly from the United States. And even as we speak, Dr. Vickery, right now there's midterm polls happening in the United States. Most pollsters suggest that the Republicans will take control of the House. If that happens, do you reckon that this blank check, this endless supply of weapons to Ukraine will stop?
Well, thanks for having me. I don't think it's ever been a blank check. I think that we have said that we're going to stand by Ukraine until the principles of international law are upheld. There have been limits on the kinds of weapons that have been furnished to Ukraine. Been very careful not to be in a position of providing offensive weapons that could trigger World War III immediately. So it's not been a blank check. The fact is, even though there have been stirrings in the Republican Party, particularly in the House of Representatives, recent poll shows that 73% of the American people are wholeheartedly in favor of support of Ukraine. And I expect this to continue, even though there are some MAGA Republicans who have embraced Russia. The fact is that there are many people in the Republican Party who have been among the strongest critics of Vladimir Putin and the Russians. So I think that the United States is going to stay the course here. I do think that India has a role to play. I think that Dr. Jaishankar, Minister Jaishankar's words are very welcome. But the fact is that actions speak louder than words. It is good to hear that what Prime Minister Modi said at the SCO was not just a casual statement, and it's good to have the embrace of the principles set forth in the United Nations Charter. But now India, if it's going to play a role, has to figure out for itself what its interests are. And its interests have to be broader than just protection of its oil supply or its arms supply. It has to be the international rule of law. Otherwise, China is going to step in and take over Arunachal Pradesh. It'll take over border areas, and there will be international instability.
Okay.
So yes, India, to answer your earlier question, can play a role. But this is not nearly at an end game, and India has to have a game plan as to how, as a great democracy, it's going to be able to work in accordance with its own principles to bring about peace and stability in the world.
Let me go to Dr. Sergei Dvoryanov, who's joining us from the IDC Russia. Dr. Dvoryanov, initially when Vladimir Putin decided to invade Ukraine, it was said that Kiev will fall, Zelensky will be replaced, the whole war will get over in a matter of weeks. But what we have seen over the last 8 months is this war just going on, and I think right now it is at a position where it's a stalemate. I don't think either side can come off this war after these 8 months and say that we have decisively won it. Isn't it time, given not just what the amount of casualties it's causing, the amount of damage it's causing, but also what it could potentially do in the coming months, both to Europe as well as to food inflation across the world, fuel inflation across the world. isn't it time that President Putin realizes that whatever his intentions were at the start of this war, he may have to recalibrate, he may have to scale down and settle for far less ambitious goals, if you will?
Thanks for your question. First of all, I'm a completely believer. I'm believer to God. That's why in your last program, when I gave interview from Vrindavan, I especially visited India to pray about peace, about peacemaking dialogue. And I also already spoke about the role of India like a mediator and global peacemaker, because you are ancient civilization. You have a roots and tradition about peace, ahimsa, and humanity. That for me, India is the main civilization which support humanity globally.
Okay.
And second point, which I want to discuss with you, Vladimir Zelensky, he is not an independent figure. He's a his politician who was appointed to this position by the Western influence. That's why this war is not a war. First of all, it's special military operation of Russian government to save Russian-speaking population of Ukraine, eastern part of Ukraine. During last 8 years,
Dr. Sergey,
this population,
that is, Dr. Sergey, with due respect, both in Donetsk and Luhansk, the eastern part, you did annex parts of it. You did have referenda in parts of it. That is done and dusted. Why doesn't the Russian president come forth and say, this was the objective of the special military operation, we're now ceasing operations, we're leading to a cessation of military hostilities. This was our objective, to liberate Donbass, and we have done that. He's not doing that. Over the last 6 weeks or so, there have been targeted attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure outside of Donbass. Why is that?
I can explain you very easily. First of all, you can see that Ukraine still going on to attack not only eastern part of Ukraine, which already belong because of the choice of nations. We should respect this choice because of the moral principles and international law. We should respect it. They keep going to attack even Russian regions. That's why we can see that it's not conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Zelensky under the pressure of Western countries. You know this very well. And Zelensky has a lot of volunteers which involved to this conflict.
Okay.
And all NATO countries increase with weapon, with influence and money Vladimir Zelensky, because that is a conflict between East and West, East and West.
All right.
And that's why we can see that Vladimir Putin today, he is the hope of all humanity to save the fundamental moral and ethical principle, which is justice.
I'm not sure
which is,
whether Western countries necessarily agree with that, but let me go back to Ambassador Triguniat. About India's role, when this war started, and this has been a big peeve for the Western countries particularly, when this war began, the amount of oil that India was buying from Russia was less than 1%. As of October this year, that's more than 20%, and there are some reports suggesting that Russia is either the topmost supplier of oil and gas to India, or it is the second highest. That has been a big point of discord as far as Western countries are concerned. Has India been able to convince the West that India will do what is best in its interests? Or there were even questions asked about where is the morality compass in increasing your oil purchases from a country that started a war?
Well, Zaka, frankly, if we get the lessons of morality or international law from the West, then I think we are done and dusted. Professor Dr. Vikri have been talking about international law and all. What happened to Iraq? What happened to Libya? It is no justification for Russia to invade Ukraine. But at the same time, those who have the glass houses need not throw the stones. That's a simple thing. But at the same time, as far as India is concerned, for the fundamental objective of any foreign policy is to ensure that your national interests are served. Yeah. We import 70% of our oil requirements, and the oil prices are hitting the roof. Russia started providing India the oil at a discounted price, which was useful for us so that we can stabilize our own energy market. We are third largest consumer in the world. And therefore, there is no harm. We don't have a problem with Russia, Russian oil. And who's buying the maximum gas? Russian gas. They are still buying. They are still dependent. This is Europeans. I
Okay.
mean, this is the double standards and hypocrisy of the West is something that Dr. Jaishankar has called out many times, and it's a fact. But I agree that there is a certain morality, and that morality is with regard to dialogue, diplomacy, and peace. And that's what India has been trying to do, calling a spade a spade. Even in our UN Security Council resolutions, whenever we have abstained, we have always upheld the UN Charter. It is not the countries from the West which have been upholding the UN Charter. It is in throughout. Every
Okay.
other country in the Security Council has violated it.
No, so let me ask Dr. Tarakarta again. There was a recent New York Times piece which suggested that Emmanuel Macron, the French president, had leaned on India to try and use its influence on Russia to get Putin to see reason. And second, that there was some informal sort of arrangement between India, Israel, and the UAE to try and form some kind of a group of countries to try and weigh in or lean in with Russia. What could be the challenges as far as getting both sides to the negotiating table is concerned, especially at a time when between America and Russia, there seems to be a fundamental breakdown of communication?
I think for first and foremost, nobody needs to really lean on India to talk to Russia, because there's no doubt that the Ukraine conflict has hit us very hard, as it has hit nearly everybody else. So the much of Asia just wants this conflict ended. And so I would assume what much of Europe. The question that you asked is on what terms, which is really difficult to answer. And I think your question to the Russian participant is a valid one. Why are they hitting beyond Donetsk? I mean, if you've got, if your claim is to those areas, why don't you stick to that? I mean, so there is a lot of, it seems the Russian war machine has sort of gone out of control. I don't think there is a kind of a united decision on exactly what their objectives are. At least it doesn't seem to me. I don't see it. So what we need to convince them is that the costs outweigh the benefits. That is the key in any mediation. And I think they've come to that point right now, both sides. So it's not going to be easy. I don't envy whoever the negotiator is. It's going to be an extremely difficult task, but it has to be done before winter strikes in fully. It just simply has to be done.
Do you see, Dr. Raymond Vickery, a sort of decoupling, if you will? I know decoupling is a pretty strong word, but you had just recently the German Chancellor go to Beijing. He seems to have taken a slightly more different position now in the last few weeks. You had Emmanuel Macron initially wanting to go along with Scholz to China. And in China, he in fact tried to tell Xi Jinping to impress upon Russia to come to the negotiating table. And like I said earlier, if the Republicans are going to take control of the House, then this quote-unquote blank check, there might be some stop checks as far as the funding flow to Ukraine is concerned. Do you see a sort of nuance now coming in to Europe, given the kind of ripple effects that we're seeing? Fuel inflation going through the roof. Even American consumers are paying through their nose for gas. The heating crisis in Europe. All of this is tempering positions. It's not quite what it was 8 months ago when the entire world was outraged by the Russian invasion, but now it's far more tempered.
Well, it's always been a decoupling in the sense that the name of the game here is to promote world peace. Peace not only in Europe, but peace with China, at the same time to uphold democratic values of the rule of law. So it just isn't the rule of the jungle, which doesn't benefit India or the United States or Russia or anybody else. And so there has always been that. There's a question, though, of timing. When a country just blatantly violates the UN Charter, crosses border, commits atrocities against the civilian population, you can't just say, oh, well, let's have peace here now. And what has happened under President Zelensky and the Ukrainians, with the help of nations from around the world, it's not just the West as in the sense of the U.S., but You have Japan, you have South Korea, you have other democracies around the world. Now it seems to me that the Russians and what Putin has said is that we can walk in and take it over in a matter of days. That obviously is not the case. So there is some scope now for having the measures to take to promote world peace.
But Dr. McCree, to be fair, I mean, you say that this is a violation of the UN Charter. Of course, it's a violation of the UN Charter. But then so was America's invasion of Iraq. It's not like the UN endorsed that invasion.
Listen. In my perspective, and everything I have read, two wrongs don't make a right.
Okay.
And to say, well, what about this or what about that in the face of what you are facing now is not an adequate answer.
All right.
India has a very strong ethical position in terms of the rule of law. If you want to condemn what the U.S. did in the past anywhere else, that's fine. But that does not solve the problem of what you do now about this greatest threat to world peace and democratic values that the world has faced since 1945.
Okay,
you have to face it on its own merits and the own interest of India, not what happened in the past.
Let me go to
Vlad
Sidorenko. Mr. Sidorenko, I think the moot question is this, that if a proposal were to be put forth that Ukraine has to give up its claims on Donetsk and Luhansk and parts of Donbass, which Russia now controls, and if that is a beginning point for negotiations, would that be acceptable to Ukraine? Because, look, at this current rate, neither side is winning this war. It's just grinding to a stalemate. Neither is Russia in a position to force an outcome, and neither is Ukraine. And if, like I said, the Republicans take the House, then you're not going to get this endless supply of weapons. So would it be acceptable to Ukraine that if a starting point for negotiations were that Donetsk and Luhansk, at least the parts that Russia controls, Russia keeps?
I just want you to understand very clearly thing. This question and this, if we accept it, it will bring the third world nuclear war. Absolutely. This man, I think he's from Russia. I guess his name is Mr. Goebbels in our, now I just hear him, yeah? So, Russian narratives about some territories, it's in 1991, the world accepted international borders. It was in 1991. After 30 years, the new Hitler launched the biggest war since 1945. We already seen it in 1938, in 1939, and we have the same. I have a question to Indian authority, to Indians and the whole world. One simple question. What world should do when everybody realizes that the world order no longer exists? There is no more international law. I just repeat, in 1991, the world accepted international borders. And answer me, please, what would be the historical responsibility of such great powers and countries as India, as China? And for Indians, you have a border with China. You have a border with Pakistan, with nuclear bomb. Yeah? And what should do the biggest democracy, India, when the international law that is ruined by this new Hitler Putin now, he's ruined it.
Okay.
What India should do in this case, not listen this Mr. Goebbels, just he's sitting from the right side.
Okay.
From me. Yeah. It's the Goebbels, Dr. Goebbels in 30s of 20th century said the same things. Jews, Austrians, Czechoslovaks, we already seen it 70 years ago. You hear it? 70 years ago, we've seen it.
Okay, look, Mr. Sidorenko, I don't think anyone wants to go back into the past and go into the Second World War and so on. What we're interested in is in the here and now and how we can find a peaceful solution. So I'll give the final word to Dr. Sergei Dvorinov. Dr. Sergei, let's be very, very clear about this. Nothing in the modern day world justifies a blatant invasion of the kind which we've seen over the last 8 months. Now the question is, how is it going to end, and who is going to end it?
I want to start my last speech from the very famous Sanskrit words Om Shanti Om. Our conversation should be beneficial to all humanity. And as you can see, it is an irony of history and its confirmation that Russian and Hindu friendship not be interrupted by any Western influence. We was never in conflict during all our history, never in any diplomacy war or any type of war, because our traditions and history and culture are very similar. And you can see that India joined to the resolution of United Nations, which was initiated by Russia about Nazi, about some type of make heroic vision of Nazi during the modern time. And
all right, I'm completely out of time. I'm sorry I have to wind up this discussion, but thank you very much to all our guests. Like I said, this is a question that's now being asked in power circles around the world, whether India can have enough heft and goodwill with both countries to bring them to the negotiating table. Ultimately, this war, it can't go on. It can't go on like this, with people being targeted, civilians being targeted, civilian infrastructure being targeted, and at the same time, for the Ukrainian side, they cannot take this maximalist position that not an inch of territory will be given up, because territory has already been given up, whether they like it or not. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, right on the other side, will the Congress party now crack the whip on Satish Jarkiholi? He has put out some blatantly anti-Hindu comments, and what's worse, he is sticking to those comments. Will the Congress party act against him? That's coming up right on the other side.
Next is Russia's war in Ukraine. Putin's invasion of Ukraine currently is in its 9th month. The US has led international efforts to bolster Ukrainian fight back against Kremlin's aggression and has provided Ukraine with crucial military, economic, and diplomatic support. That support has persisted despite deep partisan division in Washington, D.C., and rifts that have been on full display in election campaigns for Congress. The likelihood that Republicans will take control of the House has triggered concerns about the long-term support for the war effort, as a growing number of Republican lawmakers have voiced misgivings about an open-ended financial commitment to Ukraine. The politics surrounding aid to Ukraine is not an easy subject and is also being heard in political rallies. Well, on Thursday, during a visit to Pennsylvania, President Joe Biden said that the Republicans will have the power to back aid to Ukraine if they win back control of Congress. The war in Ukraine has had a direct impact on the inflation in US caused by higher energy prices, and what makes it even worse are the recent actions of one of America's most important allies in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia. The relationship between the Saudis and the Biden administration started out frosty, as President Biden criticized Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman for human rights abuses when he first came into office. When US energy prices started to rise with the Ukraine war, leading to the famous fist bump the two shared back in July, not long after that, the Saudis cut oil production during a global energy price crash. This was seen in Washington as a major review for the United States and President Biden. There's been reporting that MBS, who's just 37, mocked the president and he prefers Donald Trump over Biden. President Biden and his White House is not happy with OPEC, which is contributing to rising gas prices just weeks and days ahead of the midterm election, and gas prices are closely tied to a president's popularity in the US. Administration officials and Democrats are now wondering if it's time to reassess the incredibly important relationship, while Republicans continue to push for increased energy production at home instead of continuing to rely on the increasingly unreliable Saudi partnership. Let's now take a look at the big picture. Republican control of the legislature also could amplify the voice of former President Donald Trump, who's expected to be the party's 2024 candidate, and who pursued an America First strategy that shook up US foreign policy during his term in office. Whatever happens on November 8th, President Joe Biden will still need Congress to pass his budgets, approve his nominees for key positions, and in the most serious cases, even approve the use of military force. And there are several current potential global flashpoints for which a flip to Republican control would have consequences. No matter what's the outcome of the midterm, November 8th will also be watched by almost everyone closely in Moscow, Beijing, as they are in Washington. In Washington, D.C., Reena Bhardwaj. The midterms election campaign season largely has been defined by domestic debates over the economy, abortion, crime, and immigration. But voters will also be setting the tone for the next 2 years on international affairs. So what effect could the midterm elections have on US foreign policy? Let's start with China. There is a bipartisan consensus on China, one of the main foreign policy priorities of President Joe Biden's administration. The White House's current approach to Beijing's growing economic might and assertiveness is expected to remain relatively stable no matter what party takes over Congress. Republicans or Democrats, both are unlikely to shift the thrust of the Biden administration's China policy. In fact, expected victories by the Republican Party will almost certainly force the American leader to take an even harder line on Beijing. Next is Russia's war in Ukraine. Putin's invasion of Ukraine currently is in its 9th month. The US has led international efforts to bolster Ukrainian fight back against Kremlin's aggression and has provided Ukraine with crucial military, economic, and diplomatic.
Congress leader Satish Jarkiholi is doubling down on his comment that the word Hindu is not an Indian word. He says it's from Persia or Iran. Now, it's one thing to say this as a slip of the tongue, but the fact that he's showing no remorse whatsoever and continues to insult the word Hindu and Hindus as a fallout of it, that is simply politically unacceptable. And his party, the Congress party, other than distancing themselves, and of course, the man in charge of the state, Randeep Singh Surjewala, tweeted out saying that no congressman or woman would associate themselves with these comments. But the fact still remains that it's been 48 hours and the Congress party has not taken any action against Satish Jarkiholi. Why is the Congress not cracking the whip against Jarkiholi? But first, the story so far.
हिंदू शब्द कहाँ से आ गया? ये हमारा है, पर्शियन का है.
That's Karnataka Congress MLA Satish Jarkiholi sparking a storm with his take on the origin of the word Hindu. But the provocation didn't end there.
फिर उसका मीनिंग आपको समझ में आ गया तो आपके अब शर्म आ जाएंगे. हिंदू का जो मीनिंग है वो बहुत गंदी है.
The following day, Jarkiholi remained defiant.
ಆರ್ಯ ಸಮಾಜದ ಸಂಸ್ಥಾಪಕರಾದ ಸ್ವಾಮಿ ದಯಾನಂದ ಸರಸ್ವತಿ ಅವರು ರಚಿಸಿದ ಸತ್ಯಾರ್ಥ ಪ್ರಕಾಶ ಪುಸ್ತಕದಲ್ಲಿ ಉಲ್ಲೇಖಿದೆ. ಇದನ್ನು ತಾವು ನೋಡಬೇಕಾಗ್ತದೆ, ನಿಮ್ಮ ಕರ್ತವ್ಯ ಕೂಡ. ಅದೇ ರೀತಿ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ GS ಪಾಟೀಲ್ ಅವರ ಬರೆದಂಥ ಬಸವ ಭಾರತ ಪುಸ್ತಕದಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಡ ಉಲ್ಲೇಖ ಇದೆ.
Under fire, Congress condemned the remarks.
ಸ್ಪಷ್ಟೀಕರಣ ಖಂಡಿತ ಬಯಸ್ತೀವಿ. We will not entertain all this stuff, personal opinions. ಎಲ್ಲ ಮನೆಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಏನು ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೂ ಮಾತಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ.
But the BJP questioned Rahul Gandhi's silence.
ಸಣ್ಣ ವಿಚಾರಕ್ಕೆ ಕೂಗುವ ರಾಹುಲ್ ಗಾಂಧಿ ಅವರು, ಸಿದ್ದರಾಮಯ್ಯ ಅವರು ಯಾಕೆ ಮೌನ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ? ಅವರ ಮೌನ ಸತೀಶ್ ಜಾರಕಿಹೊಳಿ ಅವರ ಸಮ್ಮತಿನ?
Despite the outrage, Jarkiholi stuck to his guns.
ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರೂವ್ ಮಾಡಲಿ, ಯಾರು ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಪ್ರೂವ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಓಕೆ, ಪ್ರೂವ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಅಷ್ಟೇ
ಸತೀಶ್ ಜಾರಕಿಹೊಳಿ ಅವರು ಕ್ಷಮೆ ಕೇಳ್ತಾರೆ.
ಕ್ಷಮೆ ಅಲ್ಲ, MLA ಸ್ಥಾನ ಕೂಡ ರಾಜೀನಾಮೆ ಕೊಡ್ತೀನಿ, ಪ್ರೂವ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅವರು.
Satish Jharkioli, the sugar baron from Belagavi district in North Karnataka, is from a political family, but he is known to be politically incorrect. He resigned from the Siddaramaiah government in 2015, taking a stand against the government's failure to move the anti-superstition bill. In the past, he's also declared that he and Bill Gates became billionaires without worshipping Goddess Lakshmi. But with elections around the corner in Karnataka, has Satish Jharkioli become a liability for the Congress?
I want to go across to our guests who are joining us this evening. Captain Ganesh Karnik is spokesperson of the BJP. Sanket Yanagi is lawyer and spokesperson of the Karnataka Pradesh Congress Committee. Vinay Kumar Singh is an author and columnist. And Suman C. Raman, our political analyst, also joining us. Sanket Yanagi, let me start with you. Is there any plausible reason as to why your party has not taken action against Mr. Jharkioli? It's one thing to say what he said, maybe as a slip of the tongue, maybe as a misunderstanding. But today, he's doubling down on it, saying he's challenging everyone to prove him wrong. Basically, he's showing no remorse, and yet your party has not taken any action against him. Why?
We have heard the speech made by Mr. Satish Jharkioli, wherein in a public platform he is discussing about so many aspects. In the meantime, he has also initiated a discussion on this, saying that Hindu is not a term of India. It has been borrowed from Persia, and he referred to the definition of that term or the meaning of that term in Persia. So he wanted to have a discussion or a wider discussion on that topic or that subject in detail, and in the course of which he has referred to certain terms about the Hindu and Hinduism. And as such, the party has already made it clear that it is his personal opinion, for which he alone is responsible and accountable and answerable to the general public as well to the Congress
But
party.
Mr. Yanagi, the point is, here is a senior leader, I believe he's the working president of the KPCC. If he is going to say absolutely reprehensible stuff like Hindu word means dirty, it's not an Indian word, it's been borrowed, so what is Bharat's relationship with it? And your party does nothing about it. I'm sorry, what sort of message is that sending?
So first of all, the meaning of Hindu in Persian, which he has referred to, whether it is dirty or otherwise, as he meant, is the meaning which has been borrowed from the Persian dictionary, not from India.
But why should we bother about what Persian dictionary says what the origins of Hindu are? Everybody knows what the origins of Hindu are. Why do you need a Persian dictionary for that?
He has referred to the quotations from the Persian dictionary, for which reason we have said there was absolutely no reason for him to initiate that discussion. But however, he wanted to have the discussion as to
Please tell me what action your party is taking. That's all what viewers want to know. What action is your party taking?
We have already issued him the notice, and he would be explaining it with all the particulars.
Okay.
Then the party will contemplate any action if at all it is really needed.
Oh, okay.
And it is not that.
If it is really needed, you believe that what he has said is not worthy of any action. It doesn't require any action. If needed is what you've just said.
No, let me complete that sentence. I would say we are the party of discipline. We follow the principles of natural justice. We will not condemn anyone unheard.
Okay.
And we have already condemned it.
Let me ask Captain Ganesh Karnik. This is, 2 days ago what he said we've already played. Today this is what Satish Jharkioli said. There is nothing wrong in what I said. There are hundreds of records about how the Persian word Hindu came about. It's been mentioned in Swami Dayanand Saraswati's book Satyarth Prakash and Dr. G.S. Patil's book Basava Bharada. Is he trying to initiate a debate on the origins of the word Hindu, or is this downright an insult to the word Hindu and to the practitioners of Hinduism?
Zaka, good evening, and good evening to all my co-panelists also. A severely condemnable statement made by former minister and the working president of party. And I don't think Congress has to look around to, for an escape route by saying that, it's his personal statement and all that. This is Congress DNA. They have always tried to insult the Hindu sentiments, whether it is Ram Janmabhoomi, whether it is Ram Setu, whether it is cow slaughter, illegal transport of cattle, anything for that matter. They have always taken a stand to appease a particular community. This is in continuation of what they have been doing all these years. So I strongly condemn And I demand an unconditional apology by the Congress party, because it's a Congress party working president who has said this. So I have no second thoughts. Just before elections, they have to create this kind of a division, hurting the sentiments of the majority community. And they have done, or they have played this dirty trick again and again. So I condemn this statement.
So
Totally.
let me ask Sumant Raman. I mean, there is no justification for what Satish Jarkiholi said. But what I'm still curious to understand is, why is the Congress party seemingly not taking any action against him? I mean, on the one hand, you have Rahul Gandhi displaying his Shiv Bhakti and Jane Udhari and all of that, Hindutva light, as some commentators called it. And then you have leaders like Satish Jarkiholi openly insulting Hindus, and the Congress party is not taking any action against him.
Zaka, first of all, the Congress party has unequivocally condemned what he said. Mr. D.K. Shivakumar has said that a show cause notice will be issued, and they are following the process. I mean, you have to call the man and hear him out before you take any kind of disciplinary action against him. Now, the second part is that Mr. Jarkiholi happens to be a rationalist. He is not in the sense of worshipping Hindu. He is a rationalist, and he has been fighting for a very long time for an anti-superstition bill. He's even gone and slept in graveyards to bolster his causes. So I think that you have to understand that these are purely a man's personal views based on his rationalist thinking.
Sumant, can I ask one? No, Sumant, can I ask one question? No, one second. Can I ask a 10? Can I have a 10-second intervention?
Yes.
Would Mr. Fair enough. Mr. Jarkiholi is a rationalist. He's not a practicing Hindu. He's not a believing Hindu. But would he dare to ask the same questions of Islam or Christianity or Sikhism or any other religion? He wouldn't, right? Somehow, when it comes to Hinduism in this country, some people believe there's a free pass. Mr. Jarkiholi believes there's a free pass.
Look, Zaka. There are two parts to it. One, the origin of the word Hindu that he claimed. Now, that can be part of an intellectual debate. Clearly, what was unacceptable was to say that the meaning of the word is dirty. That is completely unacceptable. But the first part of his statement, to make a claim, and he says that here are two books which say the same thing. Now, that could be particularly something that would need intellectual debate. But clearly, he should not have said about the meaning being horrible or dirty.
It comes back. It comes back to that same thing. I think last time when we spoke, it was a Mr. Kamal Hassan who said, "Oh, there was no word called Hindu when the Cholas were ruling." All of this points to a certain free pass, a certain leeway that is given only to one religion in this country, which is Hinduism. You can attack it, you can punch holes in it, and there are no consequences to pay for it. But none of these people would dare ask the same questions about Islam or Christianity or Sikhism or Buddhism or any other religion for that matter. Somehow, when it comes to Hindu gods, symbols, deities, you can say whatever you want and you can get away with it. That is the free pass that I'm talking about.
Do you want Mr. Jarkiholi to abuse other religions also?
No, I don't want him to abuse any religion.
He is secular.
No, I don't want him to abuse any religion. All I'm saying is, if he's a rationalist, and surely rationalists should be as opposed to Islam or Christianity as they are opposed to Hinduism. For a rationalist, all religions are anathema.
No, my point is, I'm not defending what Mr. Jarkiholi said. I'm saying that to link what he said with the views of Rahul Gandhi, Sonia Gandhi, the Congress party, and various other people will have to come and apologize for what
No, I
said.
did not say that. I did not say that at all in the last 8 minutes of this conversation. All I said was, and it's a very limited point. Let me ask Tushar Gupta this. Should there be any visible, demonstrable action against Mr. Jarkiholi or no? Given the fact that he is a working president of the party in Karnataka, has been a multiple-time minister before, has been a multiple-term MLA before, a very senior leader. And secondly, Tushar, the fact that he's showing no remorse. He's doubling down. He's saying, I challenge you to prove me wrong. That shows no remorse. That's exactly why, and that's all the more reason why the Congress party should not just be taking action against him, but should be seen to be taking action against him. That is not happening. Tushar.
Good evening, Zaka. The answer to your question is fairly simple. Should there be action? Absolutely yes. Would there be action? Absolutely not. How did the Bharat Jodo Yatra begin? Rahul Gandhi was meeting a pastor who said Jesus is the real God. There is no God like Shakti or whatever. He started the Bharat Jodo Yatra with the insult to Hindus and Hinduism, a billion of them. Now, you have this minister from Karnataka doubling down on his statements because he's taking a cue from his leader. So the Congress may condemn his statements. The Congress may want to distance themselves from the statement made there. But what Rahul Gandhi did at the beginning of the Yatra, his legislators, his ministers are only doubling up as the Yatra progresses. And look at the cheekiness of Sumant C. Raman here. He says he's not a Hindu, he's a rationalist. Will the panelist also say that someone who's a Sikh is not a rationalist, someone who teaches Islam is a rationalist? There should be a space for intellectual debate as to when Hinduism or Hindu term was coined. Will he ask the same question today to any other religion, that let's have a debate on the origins of Islam or Sikhism or Christianity and label it as an intellectual debate? See, it's very simple to cloak everything in the garb of an intellectual debate when it comes to Hinduism, when the other religions are not offered the same treatment. All everyone says is allow for intellectual debate, but don't show your bias, don't show your hatred or your demeaning attitude towards one religion alone. Unfortunately, in the Congress, the buck starts from
I'll come to you, Suman. Give him 10 seconds. Let him finish. Tushar, finish quickly.
Unfortunately, within the Congress, Zaka, it started with Rahul Gandhi at the beginning of the Yatra. So what this minister has done comes as no surprise. Rather unfortunate, but I don't think there will be any action.
Okay, Sumant, respond to it.
Now, Zaka, my point is simple. What the panelists are basically saying is that there are certain religions which are extremely intolerant and against criticism, and why should we alone be tolerant? We should also be intolerant. Now, that is the argument. Hinduism has survived for centuries based on tolerance. Hindutvavadis have not saved Hinduism for the last 9 centuries, right? I mean, Zaka, my simple point is, has Hinduism survived? It has survived invasion, conquest of the worst kind. Billions have perished, but the religion has thrived and succeeded in flourishing in this country. It was not saved by Hindutvavadis. It was not saved by those who say that we should become as intolerant as some other people.
Okay,
so
let Captain Karnik respond to that. If Hinduism has survived thousands of years, it's not because it cannot take a slight or two. I mean, Jarkiholi making a comment, an obnoxious comment like this, is not going to dent Hinduism, is the argument being made by Sumant Raman. Captain Karnik.
Zaka, Suman Raman says Jarkiholi has been a rationalist. I think Mr. Suman Raman is very irrational in calling him a rationalist, number one. Number two, he asks a question to you, do you want Jarkiholi to be abusive on other faiths? That means he admits that Jarkiholi has been abusive on Hinduism. So this is being absolutely irrational. He is not a rationalist. He has taken an opportunity to insult the majority community. He must apologize. The party has to take an action.
But Captain, what about the question he asked? Please answer the question he asked. He says, Sumant Raman says, Hinduism is not such a delicate thing that one or two people saying something obnoxious about it is not going to dent it. It has survived for thousands of years in this country because Hindus are tolerant. That's why the religion has survived.
The religion is intrinsically tolerant.
Okay, the religion itself is intrinsically tolerant. Okay.
No, I do agree that
Captain Karnik.
Yeah,
Captain Karnik first, yeah.
Yes, Mrs. Zaka, I totally agree that Hinduism has been the most tolerant religion in this world. But that doesn't mean that it is the weakness of the Hinduism. Mr. Suman Raman or Mr. Jarkiholi, if they call themselves as rational or if they boast themselves to be secular, will they apply the same principle to all the faiths?
No, that's the question I asked, Sumant. I mean, Mr. Jarkiholi has not said anything about origins of Islam, origins of Christianity. I mean, if he's a rationalist, he should be as opposed to any religion. Okay, Tushar, and then I'm going to Sanket Yanagi after that. Tushar, yeah.
Zaka, one simple point. Tolerance, inclusivity, these are the strengths of Hinduism, not weaknesses. These cannot be labeled as excuses to demean Hinduism in the garb of intellectual debates. Let's not confuse these things. That's all.
No, the same tolerance should apply to other religions also. In Udaipur, when somebody put up a Facebook post supporting Nupur Sharma, we saw what happened to that person, Sanket Yanagi. I mean, tolerance can't be the domain of just one religion. All religions should be practicing tolerance. I mean, they all preach tolerance, but the practitioners of certain religions don't follow tolerance.
Should I reply?
Yeah, Sanket Yanagi.
Firstly, the discussion on Hindutva, especially when the elections are nearing, is BJP's agenda in order to cover up its administrative lacuna or corruption. Or
Sir, then you are saying Mr. Jarkioli is doing BJP's bidding.
And
Mr.
secondly,
Jarkioli is not a BJP leader, no.
I'm not justifying the statement made by Mr. Jarkioli. But however, this is what the BJP wanted to cover up through media also.
Sir, I'm asking
and
you
media
a simple...
is also part of this.
No, Sanket
No,
Yanagi, sir.
Let me tell you
sir,
one
very
by
simple.
one.
No, if Satish Jarkioli... One second, sir, 10 seconds. No, I don't want you to justify or diss what he has said. Your argument, sir, give me 10 seconds. Sanket Yanagi, give me 10 seconds. If you are saying that this is BJP agenda to have Hindutva cover up for their failures, I will agree to all of what you're saying, provided Mr. Jarkioli was a BJP leader. Mr. Jarkioli is a leader of your party. So you are saying that he is doing the BJP's bidding.
So that is what I have already made my stand clear and the stand of the party very clear. First of all, Jarkioli ought not to have discussed this in the public forum.
Yes.
Even inviting an intellectual debate in the way which he has done or followed, according to us, may not be required or was not a need of the hour.
Okay.
Especially when the BJP has failed in the administration and facing the corruption charges, it wanted to cover up its lacunas.
Okay.
It has given us a big boost for the BJP.
So either you are saying that Mr. Jarkioli is doing the BJP's bidding, or you are not taking action against him. Which I'm not able to fathom why you are not taking action against him. But anyway, Tushar, the point simply is this: that Mr. Jarkioli, whether it is a Jarkioli today or whether it's a Kamal Hassan, a few weeks ago, essentially what they are trying to say is the modern day construct of Hinduism, Hindutva, Hinduism as a religion as we know it, was not there. It was not thousands of years old. It was an imported concept. It came from Persia or Iran or wherever the Aryans came from. Before that, as Kamal Hassan says, you had Shaivism, you had Vaishnavism, but Hindu, according to him, was a coinage by the British.
Well, that's just his theoretical assumptions. There's no, laughable statements to say the least. But what Sumanta here is implying, it seems either he's using the virtues of Hinduism to insult other religions, or he's using his own theory to allow the insult on Hinduism. That's for him to decide. And the other panelists before him, are they really implying, Zaka, that the minister in question is a BJP mole within the Congress and yet they want no action against him? Zaka, the problem here is everyone feels threatened by a Hindu identity. Now, the Hindu identity can be political, it can be economical, it can be cultural, depends on however you want to see it. But somehow there are a lot of factions, a lot of lobbies in India who do not want to see this Hindu identity evolve for reasons best known to them. And this is what they always try to counter. So sometimes you have the theory of Dalit Muslim unity, sometimes you have the Brahmanvad, sometimes you have something else going on. During the farm laws, it was about the upper caste versus the Sikhs. So there is this faction a lot across India that want the Hindu identity to not evolve, to not come up, to not assert itself.
All right, I'll give Captain Karnik the final word. I'm running out of time, folks. I'm running out of time. Captain Karnik, final word. Only Captain Karnik.
Zaka, thank you very much. You have opened the discussion and exposed the doublespeak of the Congress party. See, they admit that he should not have said it. Now they are very, very hesitant to say that some action has to be taken. Mr. Tushar put those words which was in my heart. I can't, as a politician, I can't say those things. There is a narrative which is being promoted in this country. Satish Jarkioli, Suman Raman, and all these people are a part of a narrative which is being promoted, which is anti-Hindu narrative. Congress, during the past 75 years, I don't need a certificate from you, sir. Has taken a stand anti-Hindu stand.
Okay.
So it is an anti-Hindu party. We must appreciate that.
I got to wrap up. I'm completely out of time. Thank you very much to all our guests. Let's see how this story plays out for both the Congress and for Satish Jarkioli.
To Republican control would have consequences. No matter what.
Hello everyone, you're watching News Epicenter with me, Maria Shakil. As Delhi continues to choke under a thick blanket of smog, CNN News 18 has accessed an RTI reply which shows that the Aam Aadmi